component to child component, we can do that by using something called as what? Input attributes. Or if you want to pass the data from child component back to the parent component, from child component back to the parent component, we can do that using something called as output event emitters. Or if you want to pass the data from any component to any component, it can be having a relationship or they may not have a relationship. Now what do I mean by components do not have the relationship? For example, assume that here you have a component called as ABC. What is the relation between demo and ABC, guys? What is the relation between demo and ABC?
Both a child of employee.
So what do you call them as? Like both are right children of employee, right? When both are children of an employee, so what do you want? Right? What do you call them as? They are basically siblings. You call them as what, guys? Siblings. These are called as siblings. Here I may have something called as XYZ. And what is the relation between XYZ and ABC? They don't have direct relationship, right?
Yes.
But still, I may want to pass the data. I like this. I also store some data when I'm doing some activity in ABC component, and I want to use the data when I go back to a component called as which component? XYZ component. Basically, what do we want to do is from ABC component, I want to pass some data which can be utilized in which component? XYZ. So, if components are having parent to child relationship, then you can pass the data using something called as what? Input. If you want to pass the data from child to parent, then you can do that using output. If the components are not having any relationship, still you can pass the data by using either, right, services, or we can also use something called as what? Subjects. So I'm going to explain you all these various techniques using which we carry the data or we pass the data. Remember, it's not one that suits all. Based on your need, you have to use appropriate one so that it will be easy. Right. So now let's start with something called as what? Input. So input, what is an example of input? I have some data in my app component. I want to pass the data to what component? Employee list as well as maybe to employee component as well. So we want to pass the data to employee list as well as to employee component as well. Is the requirement clear, guys?
Yes.
Yes. So first we'll start with something called as what? Parent to child. We do that by using something called as what? Input attributes. So let's see how do we do that. App.module.ts may not be needed. Employee list is needed. Let me open app.component.ts. Imagine you have some test data here. It can be test data, it can be employee list, whatever it is. Alright, so you have some data here. Now what is a requirement? This data you can use it in which component? App component. Right. So for example, as data star ng for is equals to let I of as data I of test data I. Now we will be able to see the data here. We'll be able to see the test data. Now what is the requirement? I want to use this test data even in my employee list component also. So for that what should we do? We want to pass this data, test data, to which component? Employee list. So how do we do that? So this is where you are calling basically, this is where you are calling your employee list. So you can specify. Yesterday I have explained you square brackets, all these things, right? So attributes, property binding, interpolation, right? Different examples we saw. So here any name you give, this name can be anything. Data is equals to what data we should pass? What data? Test data. This name anything is, you name it data, list, ABC, XYZ, whatever you want. You name it anything. Here you pass the data that you wanna pass it to respect to child component. Now what do we do? Now we go back to this, I'll display there also. And next what do we do? So we go here in this employee list.component.ts. Here it is important. Now this component, when you are calling this employee list component, to that component you are passing what? You are passing the list, right? You are passing the list, right? So when you pass the data from parent to child, you are going to read the data. You are going to read the data as something called as what? Input. You have to add that namespace. You have to add that namespace. So at the rate, basically that import. What is the name you have given here to the input? What is the name you have given? List. That list is what you are going to specify here. The name. And what is the data type? What data type guys you are passing? List. Alright. List has no initializer and it is not. So as usual, same story that we have seen yesterday. Right, at the rate input list. This name should be same as this. Right, same as this. Now just save this. Test data does not exist on type.
It should be list, right?
I'm just seeing what data. Sometimes what happens is reload will not happen properly, guys. Oh, sorry. Problem is what? Here I named it as, you're right. So I named it as what? List. But in employee list component, I'm using it as what? Test data. So it should be changed to what? List. Now you see, test data is used in app component as well as test data is also used in which component?
Employee list.
Employee list component. Is that clear, guys?
Can you explain one more time?
So I have some data in our app component.
Okay.
We want to pass this data to which component? Employee list component as well. We want to pass it to what? Employee list. So what did we do? When we are calling that employee list, I added another property into which I have passed the data, test data, and that
This
can be accessed
test
here.
data is a variable, na? That variable comes in the app.component.t as well.
Varaprasad, the same I mentioned previously. Right. So when I'm explaining something, right, you asked a question, I'm explaining. Let me complete the explanation, and then you ask your doubt. Right. So
Sorry, continue.
please remember that. Right. So when I'm explaining something, you wait until I explain, guys, because I may cover your doubt in my explanation. So if you interrupt my explanation, that will go in a wrong way. Right. So wait until I complete the explanation. Please do remember that.
Okay.
So this list is an input variable that we have created in the employee list component, and this property will get its value from here. When that particular component gets instantiated, to that list test data will be assigned. This list is what we have created or we have declared here, and that list data is what we are displaying in our employee list component. Is that clear, Professor? Or any confusion still?
I'm a little confused. What is the flow of app component dot you already assigned data?
I have a component. In a component, I have some data.
Okay.
That I am using in this component, well and good. But what is our requirement? Our requirement is to pass that data to which component? Employee list also.
Right.
For that, what are we doing? When I am calling this employee list component, to that list component, I am passing this test data.
Right.
To which variable I am assigning this data?
List.
List. So here in this employee list component, I created a variable with what name? List. So when this employee list component is being called from app component, that list will get what data?
Test data.
Test data. So that test data will be assigned to this list.
Okay.
And that I am showing you here.
Okay.
Clear?
Yeah, clear. So that what happening in app.component at HTML also you are already displayed, and meanwhile employee list component.html also you can display. So it will display two places like the data.
If I have the data, I can use it wherever I want. Okay. Even in app component also, I can display the same data 10 times. Based on the need, I may not display also. Right? It's up to the requirement. You have data in your app component, you are passing it to employee component. That means employee list component. Whether you use the data, you do some operations, right? You do some computations, it's up to you.
So that the data should transfer from the parent main file to child file like that.
Not file, component to component.
Yes, component. How means any syntax is there? If you wanted to pass the parent to child, mandatory syntax.
This is the syntax.
Okay.
And here you should declare it.
Okay.
This is your syntax.
So, if for example, if I am not mention input, I can mention some constant variable. So that is it work or if you get an exception.
All such things you should do when you are practicing.
Okay.
I can answer your question. I have explained you here. If you want to pass the data from parent to child, you have to do that using what? Input. Now if you go and take this input out from here, what will happen, guys?
Okay.
Clear?
Okay.
Otherwise, what is the importance of having this input? If it can happen without input, why do we use input? It's of no use, right? Is this clear for everyone?
Yes. Yes.
Right. Now, what I'll do is, I'll make some change to this. Add. So now in this add, if I want to use ng model, I should add what, guys? I should import which module? Forms module. So here, now you get this. Now what am I doing? I will make some changes. Let me place it in within div. I'll make some change to my list. Inside which component? Employee list component. So basically, what I am trying to show you is, I have passed some data from app component to which component? Employee list component. Now I'll make changes to the data in which component? Employee list component. Now what will happen to the data that is there in app component? If I change my list here, will it update that list in app component or no? Is the question.
I think yes, it will update it.
Alright. So that's what I'm going to show you now. Click on this list. Means add. You see, E gets added there. E also gets added here. So you make change in your child component that gets updated even in which component?
Main component, parent component.
Parent component as well. If I make change in the parent component,
Updated child component.
now I'll do the same thing in my main component. I'm just trying to show you two-way. It's not list, it's test data. Now I'll add it here. Click on this add. You can see you change in the app component, it gets reflected in employee list component. You change in employee list component, it gets reflected in
Child.
child component. You make change in the parent component, it gets reflected in the child component. You make changes in the child component, it gets reflected in the parent component. Is this clear for everyone, guys? How do we use something called as what? Input.
Yeah, I have a doubt.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
In the app model that you should use import now. So the what they use is import by default browser module is there. After that you added a farm module something you added import. So why so this what is the use of that?
Did you attend our yesterday's class, sir?
No.
You had to go through that class. So, can anyone answer this question, please? What is the use of this forms module? Anyone from our yesterday's class?
If you want to bind the data,
Here I am using something called as NG model. If you want to use NG model, this NG model is part of a module called as which module? Forms module. So if you want to use NG model, you have to import forms module into your application. Alright. Now what is our requirement? We want to do the things other way. I'll have some data in my child component. I may want to pass the data from child component back to parent component. You did not pass the data from parent component to child component. You want to pass the data from child component back to parent component. Alright. So, yes, any questions, sir?
I have a question here. So, how are we defining whether it's a parent or a child? Because we are not deriving any classes or anything here, right? We're not.
Are you using this in this or this in this? That defines.
Oh, okay, only that.
Not demo.
It can be vice versa, right?
Hmm?
I mean, we can use the app component in EMP list and EMP list in the app component. Both we can use.
Then that will become what? Circular dependency. Will you be able to come out of that circular dependency? You should look at it.
No, it's like I'm saying it's like a user control. If you're not passing any data, if you're creating like a user control and you wanted to like create like a design only. In this case, mm,
One component can be used anywhere. As long as you refer that component here and you refer that component there, then it will become You will get into circular dependency, right?
Yeah, got it.
If you are not reaching that, as long as you want, you can make use of it.
Okay. So this data updation is only for the class type. It's, can we use structure in the Angular?
You answer that question, right? You Google it out and you let me know. It's not Angular, it's TypeScript basically. You should, right? Basically, what you are writing here, it's few things are TypeScript, few things are from Angular. So this at the rate input is basically from Angular, but this variable, this method, this keyword, push, all these are part of what? Your TypeScript.
Okay,
Okay.
good.
Now our requirement is I'll have some data. I'll have some data in my employee list component. It can be anything, right? So let's create that. Hmm, what name can we give? Roles. Okay, let's give it as roles. Roles equals to, why I am making it an array so that I can display and I can loop through, I can show you all those things. So employee, lead, manager. Roles, we have employee, lead, and something called as what? Manager. And what is our requirement is I want to pass these roles from employee list component to app component. See, from parent to child, passing the data is straightforward because from parent component you will call child component, and when you call the child component you can pass the data like we have done it here. But child component will not call the parent component. But our requirement is from child component we want to pass the data to parent component. So whenever you want to do that, so what do we do is you basically have to trigger an event case. When an event is triggered, that is where you are going to pass the data. You should define when do you want to pass the data. Parent to child, it was easy because from parent you call the child component. When you are calling the child component, you can pass the data. But child to parent, it's not that way, right? So now what do? We will, right? Basically, let's create an event here. Like is equals to send data, send data, send data. Send data. Now, what is our requirement? When user clicks on that button, send data, we want to pass the data from child component back to parent component. So, how do we do that? How do we pass the data from child to parent? By using something called as what? Output event emitters. By using something called as what? Output event emitters. So, like how we have declared input, let's go ahead and declare output. Output, maybe send event is equals to new. Basically, we use something called as event emitter. New event emitter. What data are you passing? What kind of data? Data type. It's an array of strings. And when the send data method is called, that is where you emit the event. So you say send event, your event dot, it has a method called as what? Emit. So you emit an event that contains some value. What value you would like to pass? What data you want to pass from child to parent? Roles. User will trigger an event. When user triggers an event, you trigger an event, you emit an event, and via event you pass the data. What data we are passing? Roles. We are passing roles. Alright. Now save this, and then we want to receive the data here. We want to receive the data. Where you will receive the data in which component? Where will you receive the data? Is my question clear or any confusion? Which component will receive the data from which component?
From child to parent. App component.
App component will receive the data from employee list component. Alright. Now how do we do that? So I created roles data. So here you will have basically again roles, string array. Roles is created as string array. And then if you observe, your child component is triggering an event. It is triggering an event, and that event will be listened by your app component. Child component will trigger an event, and who will get to know that? Who will listen to that event? Parent component will listen to that event, and it will get the data. That data. But you should specify, right? When child component triggers that event, who has to listen to that event? Parent component. But that you should specify here. So who is triggering the event here, guys?
Employee list is trigger and the child event.
Right. So basically, how do you pass? Like, who is triggering the event? Send event. Send event. And which method has to be called when that event is triggered from your app component?
Get data.
Get data. When that event is triggered, call this get data. But to that get data, we should pass what? This send event is emitting some value. That value has to be passed when you call which method? Get data. So we do that by using a built-in variable called as $event. So save this. property roles data does not exist. Here I'm using roles data, but I declared it as what? Roles. Now, if you observe, do we have roles here right now? Yes or no, guys? Do we have roles here?
No.
We don't have roles. Now I'll go ahead and click on what? Send data. Can you see? We have the data now. Employee, lead, and which one? Manager. So when I click on this send data is inside employee list component. When I click on that send data,
It's 11 o'clock.
on click of that send data function, that means that button, you are calling an event, send data. Inside that send data, what are we doing? We are emitting an event. We are emitting an event with the data. Now, who is emitting the event here? In the child component, who is emitting the event? Send event, which is created as an output attribute, that is emitting an event. So here that send event, against that send event you call which method? Get data, and to that data you, that means to that get data method you pass your data. That I am using it here. Basically from child you pass the data back to parent when someone triggers an event, and when that event is triggered in the child component you emit an event, and this event, when this event is emitted, this method will be called get data. Is that clear, guys?
Can you explain one more time?
Yeah, I'll explain. So how about others, guys? Any confusion here?
So can you explain that get data, this two line again?
Now let's go here. So we understood that from child component, when you want to pass the data to the parent component, we do that by using what?
Event emitter.
Output event emitter. Clear? From child, when you want to pass the data to the parent, you will do that via output event emitter. But you should specify when do you want to pass the data from child to parent? When someone triggers an event, right? When some activity happens, that is where you want to pass the data from child to parent. So what is that activity here? When user clicks on what? This button. When user clicks on this button, I am calling a method called as what method?
Send the data method.
Be interactive, as you asked a doubt. When I am clarifying your doubts, you be interactive so that you will understand it better. So when user clicks on this send data button, I am calling a method called as which method?
Send data method.
Send data method. Inside this send data method, what am I doing? Using this send event, which is an output event emitter, I am emitting an event. So I am emitting an event. When I am emitting an event, to that what data are we passing?
Roles data.
Roles. Now, who is emitting this event? You are calling emit method on which variable?
Emit method and send event.
You are calling this emit method on which variable?
Send event.
Send event. Now here, when you are calling this employee list, now send event, against the send event, which method value you pass?
Get data.
Get data. See, this is either list or this one. This is in the child component. Whatever you pass the value, test data or get data, this is from which component?
Get data is like an app component.
Test data, get data, these are in the app component. Left hand side, what you have is in the child component. Right hand side, the data that you are sending or maybe the event method that you are passing is from which component?
App component.
App component. So you are calling when that send event emits an event, when that send event emits an event, you call which method?
Get data.
Get data. And that get data will receive the data that you are passing from here. What data you are passing from here?
Roles.
Roles. So it will receive that roles, and that I am assigning it to my roles that I have created here, and that we are displaying it here.
Okay.
The send event is a keyword or is it a variable name?
ABCD. I can name it as ABCD. ABCD, and here I'll change it to what? ABCD. Alright. You reload this, everything looks as is. Click on this send data, you will get this data here. That is just a variable name I have given. Why I used the send event is so that you can relate it. That okay, it is sending the event from parent to from child to
Parent.
parent. Clear, sir?
Yeah.
Trust me, it may not be very clear now. It will get cleared only when you practice. You have to practice, guys. When I am showing, everything looks good, but you will start finding it difficult if you don't practice. Parent to child, you use input. Child to parent, you do that via
Output event emitter.
output event emitter. Is that clear?
Yes.
So is this clear? Any confusion here?
No.
Trust me, your confusion will go only when you practice, guys. Alright. So with that, I stop here for the day, but you have got an assignment to do, guys. Alright, let me explain you. That is simple only. In JavaScript, you should start studying JavaScript concepts, guys, as and when you get some time. So you should read about something called as what? Callback, and you should understand something called as what? Promise in JavaScript. We have these two in JavaScript. I want you to read these two before you come for our next class. Okay, so with that, I stop here and we will continue this discussion in the next class. Is it okay if we change the time from 9 to 8 or you want it to be 9?
It will be daily or what?
No, next Saturday.
It will be only on weekend.
This batch is only for weekend batch.
Okay. And one more thing, are you going to share this notepad?
Sir, I asked a
Right
question.
here?
Sir, I asked a question, right? Let people answer that question. If you want to answer that question, you answer that. After that, you go to the question. Okay.
9 o'clock should be fine.
How about others, guys?
Yes, Srikanth, let 9 o'clock be.
Okay, cool. So it will be at 9 o'clock, right? As scheduled. Yes, sir. What is your question now?
Whatever you are writing it down in notepad, that also you are going to share or what?
I have given the notes, and whatever I am writing it here, that is for your reference, and you should note down.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Right. So next Saturday at 9 o'clock, guys. Yeah. But
Thank
please practice, guys. Please practice.
Srikanth, can you help me on that web API?
Sure.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm stopping my screen share. You share it, sir.